Hey everybody, Dr. Ray, and today what we're going to talk about is the infamous car. What kind of car should you get? Can you afford it? And how much can you afford? And what should you get? All right, a lot of you have probably heard, if you're like into debt or finance, you've probably heard this like $10,000 rule, which basically says you should be getting a car, a cheap car that's $10,000 to get you from point A to point B. And sometimes, you know what? That advice makes tons of sense and is awesome. But at the same time, the people just making that blanket type of advice, it doesn't make sense for a lot of different people. Let's talk about it. Let's get into situations and talk about kind of when and what kind of car you should get. All right. So let's start out with the who should be only spending, who should be buying the clunker. Okay, here's who should be buying the clunker. The car that's simply meant for commuting, getting from point A to point B. All right, A, you're in debt and you don't have money. Yeah, you should not be spending money on a car. Car is a asset just keeps depreciating. It does not, you don't make money off the car. So it's not a good asset to have. Its point is to get you from point A to point B. All right, so if you're in debt, you should have a cheap car. If you only need the car from getting from point A to point B, and you don't have like a lot of kids, or like you don't need a truck for your business or something like that, you should definitely also have a cheap car. Those are the types of situations that someone would have. So the person who just needs to get from point A to point B, and the person who is in debt. Those are the people that should have a cheap car. And by cheap car, I don't necessarily mean like a $2,000 car, which is perfectly fine, especially for someone in debt. But if you're a commuter and you're not in debt, it's okay for you to go buy like a brand new $20,000 car that you're going to keep for 8 to 10 years, and just to get from point, you're going to rack up the miles and you don't want to worry about maintenance and stuff like that. Okay, so let's start getting into specifics. So if you're in debt, always a car is a terrible investment and a terrible thing to be spending money on. Now, if you are not in debt, you can have a little more leeway, but how much money do you want to be saving per month is the other thing. So, some people enjoy having the car is what makes them happy. And if you're not in debt and your car is something that does make you feel good, it's not a good investment, but maybe it is something that's important to you that you do want to spend money on. So in those kind of cases where you have the money and it's not putting you in debt, it's okay to get a car. And a lot of people, I see a lot of people want to get a truck, or they have, like me, I have 3 kids. So a standard small car doesn't really fit us in the back seat. You try to put 3 kids that are, especially when they're grown, in the back seat, it doesn't really work. So you sometimes have to actually get something that's a little more pricey. And if you've priced it, used trucks, you can't buy a used truck for $5,000 unless it's got like 200,000 miles on it. So I think a lot of people sometimes when they make these blanket statements aren't considering situations. So what I recommend that you do is you look at your situation. You say, what do I want to spend on a vehicle? What kind of vehicle do I realistically want? And what can I actually afford? And between those 3 things, you figure out what is the vehicle for you. That may be a $2,000 vehicle. That may be a $10,000 vehicle. That may be a $20,000 commuter car. Or it may be a $60,000 SUV or truck. I mean, if you need that truck, a brand new truck for your business, and that's what you do, yeah, you gotta buy the truck for 50 grand or 60 grand or whatever it is. So don't think that buying that is always a terrible thing to do. There are reasons why it can be good. Another thing to consider is that, when you start talking about like, how long is someone, like if you want to have a new car every, should you lease, should you buy, how long should you keep, like if you're buying a $60,000 car and trading it in every 5 years, like that's a lot of money, especially if you're stretched thin and not balancing your budget real well and don't have a large savings, large retirement fund. That's a lot of money. If you're buying it, if you love that $60,000 car, really have to buy it, keep it for 12 to 15 years, have it paid off, and then be paying nothing. It really is gets to be a huge burden on your income. The other thing to think about, when people talk about like, oh, just buy a used car, a used vehicle is the solution to your problems. If you've priced a used vehicle lately, a used vehicle with 50 to 100,000 miles on it that's 5 years old might not even be 10% off the sticker price of a brand new vehicle. I feel like the people saying buy this cheap used car, it loses all this appreciation. It depreciates 30% right when you take it off the lot. That's not true. There are many vehicles, specific brands that do not depreciate like that. So make sure you're looking that up when you're looking at like the brand and how much a car depreciates that you're actually going to buy. Sometimes it's actually worth buying a new car versus the 3-year-old one with 40,000 miles on it, depending on your use and what you're going to use it for and how long you intend to keep it. If you're only going to keep it for a few years, then yeah, you should buy the 40,000 mile one. But if you're planning to keep this for 15 years, 20 years, it's probably worth it for you to just get the new one. And you do not save the 10% that you're going to save. You have to look and consider these kind of things when you're going to buy a new car. So when someone asks me, what kind of car should I get? Should I afford it? I ask them, what do they need it for? How much can they realistically spend on this? And what's their debt situation like? You have to consider those things. And, and also add in, when I say how much can they afford, can they spend, I look at their and how much are they saving? If you're taking in $5,000 a month, having a $600 car payment if you're saving $5,000 a month, having a $600 car payment is not a huge deal. But if you're saving negative $300 a month, any car payment is a big deal. And you're the person that should be spending cash on a vehicle, only buying what you can afford. But I think just giving a blanket statement to everyone is really tough to say, oh, only pay cash for the vehicle. There are reasons not to only pay cash for the vehicle. If you're trying to build up your credit, then maybe it's not worth you paying it. Maybe it's not. Maybe you budget money better when you have a payment. You have to start thinking about every situation and every person. So let's talk about if you're that person in debt, you should be paying cash for the vehicle, and you should be not spending a lot of money for it. You should only be buying what you can afford. And that's the basic rule of car buying. I hope you learned something. If you do have any questions about this, please let me know. There's not a lot to it. You just have to really consider if you can afford it or not.